Hi, my name is Mark Ward, and I'm the festival programmer for the Redline Book Festival. We're here today with the first of our Between the Red Lines side or mini festival happening this week from the 22nd to 28th of February, something to get you through yet another lockdown. We will be back in October with Redline Book Festival 2021, which will be our 10th anniversary festival, and the dates for that are the 11th to 17th of February. Here today, I'm going to have a chat to John Patrick McHugh, author of Pure Gold, and his John Patrick McHugh is from Galway. His fiction has appeared in Winter Papers, Banshee, The Tangerine, Granta, and Stinging Fly, and Pure Gold is out this week from New Ireland. John, welcome to Redline. How have you been, and how has this very strange time been treating you?
Hey, Mark. Thanks so much for having me. How's it been treating me? Much like everyone else, good days and bad days. Yeah, I suppose it's obviously so weird, and you can't complain because I'm so grateful my family are all okay. My nana and Ackle and my nana and my granny in Galway are all good, so one can't complain. But yeah, there's some days you're just like, oh my God, you just miss your friends and just going to a bookshop or going to the cinema. I never thought I'd miss paying to go to see the cinema, but yeah, up and down. But you got to kind of remember it's for the greater good.
Absolutely. I really miss bookshops. I swear to God, I could spend days at a bookshop just wandering, and yeah, I absolutely can't wait. But we'll get through it. Pure Gold, which I held up a minute ago, is your first collection of short stories. So there's 8 stories written over 8 years, I believe. Can you tell me how it came about, what came first, and when did you realize that you were working towards a collection?
Yeah, I suppose I'll start with what came first. What came first is the first story in the collection, Bonfire. I did a BA in NUIG, and it had like creative writing module on the side, so you do maybe 2 classes a week for about 5 credits. Mm-hmm. And in the third year of that, you kind of get a year off from academic study, and you get a mentor. So I got a mentor in Mike McCormack of Solar Bones, yeah, fame and getting in the head. Yeah, this an amazing gentleman and just like such a talented writer. And for that year, I worked in a hotel, full time and wrote like a writer, I suppose. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I was just getting to the library as much as I could. And I wrote 6 or 7 stories. 6 of them were terrible, and then one of them was Bonfire, which was okay. And it was like the last story I gave to Mike, and he like said, "Oh, you should send this to Singing Fly." And it felt like, I did something, or I accomplished something that kind of set me up. And it was probably from that story that the rest of the collection kind of formed in my head, or at least I got the idea that I wanted to do a collection. Like, I'm not one of those people that have, a novel in a drawer waiting to come out or anything like that. Yeah. It was always stories. So yeah, Bonfire was the spark. I wrote the first draft of that when I was 20. And I applied then for a master's, and I was lucky enough to get into UEA, the master's over there in Norwich. And once I kind of got there arrogantly or some, determined fashion, I thought, no, I'm going to do a collection. Yeah. So it was kind of from that age, about 21, all I had in my head was like, I'll get the first collection. And yeah, it took 8 years, a lot of rejections. I think this book originally went out maybe 3-4 years ago, with maybe 3 or 4 different stories in it, and it got a lot of rejections. So it was a long old journey, but that's writing, isn't it? You just got to take the blows and just keep going.
Yeah, and it takes a very long time, and I think the fact that it's taken a long time kind of shows in the book and how tight and considered it is. All of the stories are united by the fact that they're set on an imagined island off the west coast of Ireland. Can you tell us more about that and kind of where that came from and why the unified setting?
Yeah, it came from just my own kind of background. My mother's family's from Ackle Island, and I used to spend all my summers, my Christmases, my long weekends, my bank holidays up there with my cousins. We had a little place, we used to be all in with my nana, and then eventually we got a little place just beside her. And like my happiest days were just playing in Ackle. You don't realize it at the time how good it was, but we used to just play outside, messing, and my cousins to this day are still one of my best friends. So when I started writing, we moved a lot as a family moved around a lot. So Achill was always one concrete place in my memory in my childhood. So when I was writing, I kind of was naturally drawn to Achill and the island. So all my stories were getting set on this island that was slightly gothic, that was like Achill at a slant. It was like my version of Achill, which is like nostalgic and kind of slightly twisted, but kind of childhood kind of misrememberings and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it just came very naturally that all the stories would be set there. And like, you know, these are stories about, maybe a lot of them about youth or disillusionment, et cetera, and it, obviously an island setting then just heightens that. So thematically it all kind of works in my favor, but it did come naturally because I love Achill and I wanted to write about a place like Achill, but Achill's a lot more cheery than my island, I think, so I had to change some bits of it.
It's funny, I thought it might have been Achill, and you know, it makes perfect sense, although I do think your island is a bit, as you're saying, a bit more darker. My sisters, when they were kids, my family used to go to Achill as well, so it makes, you know, it definitely has that link to childhood and youth and kind of somewhere different but still Ireland. Could you read us a bit from Bonfire, the opening story?
Yeah, I'm going to read the first 2 pages. Bonfire. That summer we lit fires, Terry and I. We'd meet in the mornings when oats still gummed my molars and the sky was beginning to shake itself blue. 2 of us dressed in tready sleeve jerseys. 2 of us decorated with scabs and cuts and small sloughing burn holes. When we had money, we chucked it together and bought matches from Brett's newsagent. And when we had no spare coppers, the more likely, we snatched clickety lighters from the dashboard of Terry's dad's van, or bummed fizzing matches from the backyard smokers of the clinic. Then, bodies gunned over the handlebars of our bikes, we'd thunder on in pursuit of fires, the island quaking from our shouts. Time had no use to us. Days never had acts, never dulled to a yawn, never became sticky. Rather, they were endless, borderless, buzzing alive until we were confronted by the full stop of night. There was no wind on the day of the bonfire. To the south, the sky's edge was brick red, and the clouds, mirrored in the puddles about the field, held the same ruby gold glow in their fleeces. Terry was on the ground, the canister clamped between his thighs. I was crouched beside him, acting like I wasn't paying much attention as he wrestled with the screw-tight lid. But with each failed attempt, I noted how Terry's expression twisted, his eyes bunching to wrinkles, how the lighter fuel meant this vexing, plopping sound. All of a sudden, Terry yelled fury and brought the lid to his mouth, and using the grit of his teeth, slowly grinded it open. Blood trickled from his mouth as we poured the fuel over the plywood and tires and branches and cardboard and pallets and paper and hay. Already the bonfire seemed to sizzle.
Wonderful, thank you. I love in that story, I suppose, especially since it's an opening story, I don't want to spoil it, but the narrator's treatment of Terry, of his friend Terry, and kind of, I suppose, the trying to be masculine, trying to be young, trying to get one over. It's just very much something that comes out in this book, like modern masculinity, male relationships, and trying to navigate them seem to be recurring themes, not only in Bonfire, but in the narrator of the title story, Pure Gold, who spooks and turns on the boy that he's fooling around with once an audience arrives. Were these kind of themes of masculinity and kind of fractured relationships something you set out to discuss?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say I set out to thematically discuss them. When I think if you set out like that, you're going to write a boring polemic, and no one wants to read that. Sure. But I think very naturally, when I started writing, these kind of concerns and my own fascinations with that just came up in the stories without much thought or without much conscious thought. And then obviously when I went back and when I read them again, I was like, oh, that's where that's something I'm fascinated by. And I think male friendships just in general, and they're kind of a big part of the book.
Yeah.
They kind of just fascinate me, because a male friendship can be so lovey-dovey, and then within a second it can be the most vicious relationship going. And I've always been kind of fascinated with that. And I suppose I've been thinking recently kind of about these stories more abstractly, just because you have to after writing them. You don't really think about stories when you write them. It's only when they're all done and other people read them. But I moved around a lot as a kid, so I went to a lot of different schools. And I think I've always kind of viewed friendship almost from the outside looking in. And I could always view friendship as like a ranking, like a league table, where you have like those certain boys up there and then other boys, and I've always been fascinated by that power dynamic and how it can change, and how, you cling to power. You can you would banish your best friend to cling to power when you're that age and stuff.
Absolutely. Like that. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think kind of particularly as teenagers or young adults, male friendships is a game. It's about power. It's about status, and everyone looking at you or not looking at you, as the case may be. As well as male relationships, there's also relationships in general. Hoarfrost, one of the stories, is a terrific chamber piece of a marriage in freefall where they're trying to plaster over the cracks through swinging with another couple. And Bury It, another story, shows the aftermath of a relationship where the narrator is left holding a baby, in this case, a dog. How did those two stories come about?
Yeah, they're kind of interesting stories in the overall collection, I think. I do think they all kind of tie in together, but those two do stand out, I suppose, because they're quite different, and they're both female perspectives, and women characters dominate. I suppose both of them kind of come from images in a strange way. Hoarfrost, I remember writing that. It was like my third week in UEA, and I couldn't write. And I remember going to bed thinking, I'm not a writer. I shouldn't be here, which is a thought you have often when you are a writer. But I woke up in the morning after a dream where I just saw a couple in a car going down like this abnormally long dirt road, which is obviously a road I know from Achill, because they were all dirt when we were growing up. And I just came fascinated by this couple. Like, where are they going? Why are they not talking? I could see, the iridescent kind of frost in the bog and stuff like that. And originally it was kind of like a bait and switch, where the whole premise is like, oh, are they swinging or not? But I kind of realized that you kind of guess within 2 paragraphs, and sex isn't as hidden as it was 20 years ago in Ireland. So it kind of confronted me that I had to kind of get at the characters more and get at Annette. And she kind of dominates the story for me, and her insecurities and her bizarre lies. So that came from just an image of a dirt road and a car going down it, which is very much like Achill. I remember going down those dirt roads in the car in Achill, and it's chilly outside. And Bury It, even more blatantly, in my nana's house, there's an old stable beside it, and I just remember being fascinated by it as a kid. And she used to have, my grandfather, before he passed away, he had 5 or 6 dogs, and I'll never forget it just, not in a maybe the barbaric now, but once he passed away, something had to be done with those dogs, because they were going to be used, and they were all shot. And it was just a fact of life. And I've always been kind of fascinated by that. I know Heaney's touched on his poetry, like not quite the cruelty of farm life, but how cut and dry it can be. So again, that was just an image of the stable and the dogs, and then just seeing what I could do. And then, these are how it starts, but both of those were drafted, and the idea of grief and lies kind of came up then, but that was the original starting point for both then.
I think like what you're saying about Heaney, I think like poetry, more so than fiction, short story can focus on an image and extrapolate it. And I do think I was kind of smiling to myself when you're saying about that road and where are they going, because I think that's what makes a writer. It's like, going, well, where are they going and what's going to happen when they get there? And I need to know. And even if I don't write the story, I still need to know. But the short story as a form, it seems to go through a resurgence every few years. I don't think it actually ever goes away. I think it's very much embedded in the kind of Irish psyche. And I think it's very much suited to Ireland, and the west of Ireland in particular attracts its own specific brand of short stories, slightly feverish, slightly surreal, but quite grounded, like the likes of Kevin Barry or Blind by Book Club, and now yourself. How do you feel about the short story as a form and its place in the Irish canon? That's not too lofty a question.
Yeah, well, I feel so proud, I suppose, of the Irish short story. I think it's amazing. I think we've produced such amazing writers in the last couple of years, and we still are producing amazing writers. And I don't think there's any secret to it. I just think we have a really good literary journal culture here in Ireland, and it encourages emerging writers. And I think of, like, Kevin Barry, Colin Barrett, Nicole Faraday, Claire Louise Bennett, whose Pond is one of the best collections I've ever read in my life. We're thriving, and long may it continued. So I feel very proud, and very like, I've met a couple of those writers, and they've all been so encouraging. So there is like a real sense of community in Irish writing, which again I think is why we're doing so well. In terms of the West as a kind of a setting for short stories or anything like that, I think it's just because there's so much space in the West, and when you go up there, you have to invent stuff, you have to entertain yourself, you have to come up with stories. And I suppose, even like the surrealist story, which is probably a horse going into a house party, in my head, I'm like, that could happen. Even in Galway, I'm like, that could actually happen. Something in the air. But I think the Irish short story, it's in such like thriving health, and so much of it's down to the literary journals and the editors who tirelessly work.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think there's definitely not only is there a culture of literary journals, but I think there's a culture of anyone can submit and anyone can get published, and it might take you some time, but we'll encourage you and we'll champion you when you get there, kind of culture. Speaking of that story, How Your Horse, that was the first story of yours I read in the last issue of Banshee. Like you're saying about that, it's got that surreal premise: the horse clambers into a house party, but it's treated with total conviction and seriousness. Without spoiling the story, which I love the kind of way it upends the narrative trope on its head, could you read a little from that story in case it takes?
Yeah, I'll read the opening paragraph, which I think will show people the surreal element. When the horse with the lurcher face barged through the front door of the mansion on the hill, thunderously, jarringly, horsily, Cotter was explaining to Marion that it was actually no huge deal for him to have come inside her. And though he should not have done it in the first place, because A, she'd explicitly warned him not to, she hated the idea, because B, he'd promised he'd 100% not come inside her, she hated the idea. The fact of the matter was that a rubber Johnny had been snugly and securely wrapped upon him, that the heated juice was consequently swaddled up inside of it, and therefore, aside from her own icky superstition, how bad, really and truly. They're on the landing of an L-shaped staircase overlooking an expansive living room. Both are a little sweaty, both hastily dressed. Cotter's explanation was not going down brilliantly, though he was unsure why he required it to go down brilliantly at all. And so when this new steedy intruder to the house party skidded into the living room, the breaking screech of horseshoe encountering varnished floor, the bump and scamper of its ungainly motion, he was more than happy to interrupt himself mid-line with a dreamy mutter of, "Watch the horsey," as the animal's vein-knotted rump knocked the flat screen television and clattered into the bookshelves spanning the far wall.
Thank you. I love that. I love the word horsely as well. I just need to say that. Not only did the horse community became a horsely. I didn't want to spoil kind of where the story goes, but I love the pairing of the surreal image of the horse coming in and the not sexual politics, but I don't know what I'd call it, the particular situation between the boy and the girl that's going on there. I just love that story. It must be a strange time for you to be launching your first book during the pandemic. How do you plan to do so, and what's the plans going forward? And is there a party? Is there what can you expect?
No, I'd get arrested if I said it on the stream anyway, if there was one. But it is a weird time to launch a book, but it's also, that's life, and there's worse things going on. I feel very lucky because this is so lovely. It's so lovely to do this with you, Mark. And my friends have been so nice. My family and other writers have been so lovely. My publishers at New Island have been great, doing Trojan work. So it's been like, for publishing a book, I've been having fun, and it's been nice. I suppose like the one thing you will miss is a launch where you kind of like get to guilt people to buy 5 copies and get to drink cheap wine and have a boogie at the end of the night. But it's been very pleasant as kind of getting a book together can be, I'd imagine. And for the plan for Thursday, you know what? I was just thinking about it today. I think I'm going to have a bottle of Bookfest, and I haven't had one in years, but I just feel it's a fitting end to Pure Gold's journey.
That sounds like a plan. I think you have to mark it in some way. Absolutely. I'm going to ask the dreaded question that some people hate. What's next? Are you working on something new, or will there be more short stories or different forms or a novel, or not to pressure you into writing a novel immediately? Just what's next?
Yeah, what's next? Well, I'm having a great time at the moment. I'm writing about a video game, Final Fantasy IX. I'm just having a ball writing that, and just kind of being allowed to write my nerdy obsession. But
fantastic.
Oh yeah, I love that game, and it's just hilarious that I'm allowed to write it.
Can you tell us what that's for, or is it secret?
It should be for the Sting and Fly at some point.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so fingers crossed if the editor doesn't hate it. But and in terms of fiction, I do plan to write a novel. Don't know how I'm going to do that or how one does that, but that is definitely the plan going forward. They got to get a start in it. But I'd imagine I'll inevitably fall back into short stories. I think I'm a short story writer first and foremost, and I'm thrilled to be one. But yeah, so I will have a go at a novel.
Well, we're very excited for the novel, and personally, I'm very excited for the Final Fantasy story. There's an anthology coming out this year, video game poetry, that I'm in, so I'm like super excited about that, because yeah, it's very much my thing. But yeah, we hope to read more short stories by you, and we're sure we'll have you back for the novel when it's out. It just remains to say thank you for being here today, John. Pure Gold is out this week on the 25th of February from New Island Books. Be sure to check out the Redline Book Festival for the rest of what's going on between the red lines, which runs from today until the 28th of February. We have Rachel Conlon McKenna, we have Lisa Harding, and a whole host of people whose names have completely escaped me. But check out redlinebookfestival.ie and be sure to order your copy of Pure Gold by John Patrick McHugh. John, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark.